Hi, everybody. I'm Richard Steenan, and I'm joined by my colleagues, French Caldwell and Tom Austin. We're talking about analyst relations. So we're all experienced analysts, the three of us, but we interact with analyst relations people and professionals all the time. And French, and with a little help from the rest of the analyst syndicate, conducted 30 interviews with analyst relations professionals. And we learned about their challenges, priorities, and professional development needs. And obviously, this is for some future services that we hope to offer. French, why don't you walk us through what you found from those interviews?
Well, sure. Really, just to sum it all up, we were shocked when we went in expecting to find that, hey, the challenges would be, essentially challenges related to the relationships that AR professionals and their companies try to manage with the analysts and the analyst firms. Well, that's not quite where we ended up. We found that the challenges certainly are around AR bandwidth. There's a lot going on. Analyst firms are adding all kinds of new premium reports, certainly the magic quadrants, the waves, but you've also got bandwidth constrained by new models from things like Capterra, Peer Insights, and other crowdsourced models. So the changes in the advisory model are creating quite a bit of confusion. Also, the large firms continue to sort of squeeze to bypass analyst relations people and going directly to product managers, CEOs, CFOs with offerings for those individuals. And then what we really found as being the primary challenge for analyst relations professionals really has not so much to do with analysts or the analyst firms, but managing the internal relations. The internal relations with their peers in marketing and in product management, and with the senior executives, especially the CEO. And those challenges we'll go into a lot more here. As far as priorities, look, creating value. How does the analyst relations function create value? That was a big question mark. And especially, how do I explain that value to my peers and to the executives? Managing analyst engagements, that's a challenge, but most of that is coming from internal challenges, not from the analysts themselves. And then how do I use new AR tech? How do I leverage technology and new AR services that are being offered to analyst relations professionals? So that's the summary. Now, Tom, how about a little bit more detail on what we did?
Sure. With respect to professional development, the AR professionals that we spoke to shared their insights as to what an analyst relations masterclass program should include. And we'll be talking about that in detail. But at a surface level, we have to address the key challenges and priorities that the analyst relations pros are experiencing. And we have to cover the fundamental aspects of the AR role, getting the most value from analyst strategy days, inquiries, and briefings. French?
And of course, we went about this by conducting bottom-up research, going directly to the analyst relations professionals and speaking to 30 of them and asking them very simply, what are your challenges? What are your priorities? What would you like to see from a professional development program? And when we were done, and by the way, that was interviews conducted by Tom, Richard, myself, and others in the analyst syndicate. In the end, we were saying, aha, it's not about the analyst, stupid. It was really that internal relations challenge, managing that challenge with the corporate peers and executives.
It's a good thing we tested that assumption, French, because, I mean, as you know, I wrote a book on all of the tactical side of managing relationships with analysts. And yeah, I threw in some verbiage about, analyst relations is a all of company approach, et cetera. But in reality, the analyst relations pros know all that 101 stuff. They're looking for influence, ways to influence and manage internal corporate peers and executives. So it's easy to apply the several hundred years of experience that these 30 former mostly Gartner analysts at the Analyst Syndicate have to exactly this problem.
So we realize as experienced analysts, we would be creating a AR 201, not a 101 course, Richard, to follow up on your comment. Exactly. And we knew we'd be missing a lot if we just kept the whole program to ourselves as we were developing it. So we reached out to analyst relations professionals via LinkedIn. We asked, can we have a half an hour of your time? The response rate was terrific, and the insight and advice we received were fantastic. Richard?
Yeah, as far as challenges, AR pros told us that AR bandwidth is strained, right? They're basically overworked. They don't have the resources. Demand for analyst relations is increasing within their organization. There are not enough junior ARs, right? This isn't a career track that a lot of people, decide they're going to go into when they go to college, right? They come out, they get into marketing or PR, eventually get asked to do analyst relations roles. There aren't enough of those people filling the hopper. Quadrants, waves, other ratings reports are proliferating, as French said earlier. Every new analyst firm wants to create their own thing that has the impact that these other firms have. And responding to MQs and wave requests is not just enough. AR pros spend a lot of time with the analysts.
And let me jump in with a perspective, a historical perspective that I think is very valuable here. Back in 1994, this is, the previous century, when I was an analyst and I was talking to IBM, to Steve Mills, who ran IBM software business, such as it was at that point in time. He had one analyst relations professional working for him, Dave Liddell. Great guy, by the way. And he retired about 13 years later. And when he retired, he had 33 direct reports, all analyst relations professionals. And I've since updated this number because that's quite a bit dated. And what I understand now is they have going on 100 people in the AR organization supporting that. Now, the business has grown as well. But 2/3 of those people are what all of us would consider AR professionals. The rest are support staff and administration and so forth. But that gives you a sense, from 1 to 33 to 60 some odd, AR bandwidth demand is increasing, just like Richard, you were saying. And the other thing that's happening, let me just move a little further along, is that the advisory model changes are confusing. The industry advisory future is uncertain. There are crowdsourced platforms out there like Capterra and Gartner Peer Insights and IT Central Station and G2. There's actually about 10 or 12 of those on our list. They offer a lightweight alternative to analyst advisory services for buyers. Meanwhile, the crowd inputs that go into those crowdsourced platforms are being mined by the vendors or the service providers who created them to create other products to sell back to technology providers like those that you work for. That's a confusing set of changes.
Exactly. And complicating things further, Gartner, the behemoth in this market, has begun incorporating peer insights into its Magic Quadrant process. And it's also bypassing analyst relations professionals and selling directly to marketing and product management leaders, and undermining AR pros' abilities to command attention from corporate peers and executives. Several AR pros mentioned that analyst firms are pushing back on analysts doing certain types of activities that have been traditional, such as document reviews or providing feedback on a pre-release version of a product. Instead, the firms are trying to channel those types of inquiries into what are more expensive consulting engagements. This once again undermines the role of the AR professional.
And the biggest challenge to spend a little time on here is the challenge of managing internal relations for the analyst relations professional. You need, because I'm assuming that most of you in the audience today are AR professionals of one kind or another, you need to be able to generate real business value. And to do that, you've got to coordinate hand in hand and interoperate with the marketing professionals, the product marketing people, the product management peers, and corporate executives in sales and so forth. And what's happening today, we hear from you, is that you get pushback from those people because they think they own this, not you. And then you ask them to contribute and get involved. For example, when Gartner has a Magic Quadrant survey, it's MQ time, and you're having a difficult time getting everybody to support the needs that you're trying to address for the sake of your organization.
Yeah, exactly, Tom. And some of the analyst pros we talk to are repeatedly reintroducing the entire concept of analyst relations to the rest of the internal team, right? So they're constantly having to, reemphasize why we do this, and probably train people on, how to handle the sales field team when they say, "Oh my gosh, if only we're in the upper right-hand quadrant or at the head of the wave, then, and it's all marketing's fault because we're not there." And, that just takes constant education. AR pros spend a lot of time coaxing and guiding product marketing style and messages to avoid turning off analysts with too much hyperbole. And we've all seen the documents that marketing can produce. And I can tell you, as analysts, we just get totally turned off if you have an entire sentence about your product that says nothing about it. And that happens over and over. AR pros are similarly caught between their own product managers and outside analysts, trying to better align both sides. So they're really matchmakers, right? They're aligning the educational capability of the product people with the desire to learn of the analysts.
One of the things that we found too, Richard, and this was, I think, a real shocker, was that even when it is MQ or wave time, when you enter that period and you're getting the questionnaires from the analysts, the AR pros are still having a hard time getting the right attention to it. They may need pricing information or need a updated version of the product roadmap. They need help from product management on completing the questionnaires. And even then, they find that they have a hard time trying to get the attention and time of their peers. And executive attention is even harder to get. Certainly, one of the things that I've found personally is that when the CEO or in a large company, the essentially the general manager for the product gets involved, then that gets everybody else involved. But that doesn't always happen. And outside of the MQ or wave process, executives, when you get them on a call with an analyst outside of that process, they seem to try to spend more time building a personal relationship with the analyst in a 30-minute call rather than and trying to tell the analyst what to believe, and not enough time listening to the analyst. Overall, with executives, demonstrating the value of AR is really difficult. It's one of these things that came up over and over again, because that value is just often not visible, except when you're positioned favorably in quadrants and waves. And once that happens, well, the executives and the product managers want to just get back to work, and we'll revisit that in 7 or 8 months' time when we get the next questionnaire.
Yep, exactly. And then, the result of all these interviews you conducted help generate these AR Pro priorities. Number one, you were just talking about generating and then proving the business value of an analyst relations program. The analyst relations pros want to help their business leaders gain analyst insights into the competition and competitive trends. Quite often it's so valuable to know what your entire space is doing and what direction it's moving. And of course, the analysts have input from the market itself. They want to help their businesses be more strategic. So instead of the tactical, we got to get the dot to move in this direction, it's, how do we, part of that is increasing revenue and increasing breadth and scope across the world. They want to use analysts to help their execs see different views than what they get from their, their current screens, or of course their internal bubbles that they built around themselves. And they want to use analysts to test market hypotheses and give feedback on planned marketing campaigns.
That's certainly right. And, the traditional role of managing analyst engagement is also one of the priorities that AR pros mentioned. It's a critical part of the role. And it's certainly still essential to have a good calendar and good planning, a cadence of communication with analysts. But even that role is changing. Many analysts spend quite a bit of time promoting their own brands out on social media, and being able to engage in LinkedIn and Twitter and other social media venues with those analysts is become a challenge for many AR pros who were not necessarily focused on the social media strategy of their companies. So that's really big. And also, by the way, capturing metrics, following up with the analyst, ensuring that the right people within the company provide follow-up. All of these things are really still important, but it's changing due to new technology and new ways of engaging that have been introduced by that technology.
Yeah, absolutely. And then one key challenge is engaging the executives to meet with the analysts. So oddly enough, a lot of executives are shy. But also, on the other hand, a lot are, pure salespeople, and they just want to grasp the hands and be buddy-buddy. Both things can be a turnoff to an industry analyst, but it's hard managing executive communications with analysts because of a divergence in goals. The AR pros have to see through and figure out how to work around. Executives want analysts to treat them as the ultimate source of truth on strategy and vision. But most seasoned analysts have way too much real world experience to buy that. You're the 40-year-old executive who's been in the industry for 10 years, and now you're talking to somebody who's seen it all, right? They were like 3 evolutions or generations of computing technology before you. So they do have vision and insight that they can contribute, if only the analyst relations pros can kind of open up the minds of the executives so that they take it for what it's worth, which is usually pretty high value.
And beyond executive engagement, let me just repeat what I said earlier. Key priority for you is to align the complex internal teams that you have, namely, product marketing, product management, sales management, and so forth, to this complex map of analysts and analyst influencers, that is to say, the sources that influence what the analysts think and say when they talk to your prospects. And so the top priority is to align the complex internal map and the complex external map to ensure that the information is flowing in both directions in a suitable way. And since the analysts don't work isolated from the rest of the world, identifying them, identifying the influencers on these influencers, tiering them in terms of their overall impact, mapping their networks is also a key priority.
Yeah, you said it, Tom. And now, originally that was just an application for a spreadsheet, right? Keep track of the contacts and have a cadence of briefings and queries. But it's getting complicated with all the things we've been talking about. So welcome to AR Tech. So it's usually a SaaS-based service, but it tracks your relationships and your to-dos and the contacts that you have in the analyst world. And it's a tremendous value to you, but it's getting complicated knowing how to best apply that to social media accounts, engaging with analysts and participating in their online networks, which can help to raise a technology provider's profile.
So let's cut to the chase. Where do we go with this? What's needed in a masterclass for AR professionals, and not just for you as an AR pro, but perhaps maybe for some of those product marketing people and product managers and executives and so forth that you're trying to influence and manage indirectly. So in addition to sharing your challenges and priorities with us, many of you also contributed your ideas on what should be included in a masterclass curriculum. Number one, again, I'm being repetitive, but I think it's so important to talk about how to work with internal stakeholders. Now, how do you collaborate with peers? How do you engage them and the executives? That's the greatest challenge. So that's priority number one for the AR Masterclass.
And then number two is how to leverage AR with the sales organization. So it's kind of, quite often there's a conflict between all of marketing and sales, but AR and sales in particular. It's an essential subset of working with internal stakeholders. And then thirdly, the value of AR, how to demonstrate it, how to build an appreciation for it, because that's just going to make your job easier to do. Four, the kind of the tactical working with the analysts. Many of the AR pros with whom we spoke see this as a fundamental element. It's table stakes. They identified it as important to junior AR pros, and even as a refresher for senior AR pros. Of course, in your own profession, it always helps to get a refresher because you might generate some ideas that you hadn't been exposed to, especially the kinds of things that we can bring to the table, because we haven't seen it all, but boy, have we seen a lot. And then a section on how to do an analyst consulting day. These aren't as popular as they used to be pre-COVID, but it's still an excellent opportunity to just go all in and convince and educate the analysts about who you are as an organization, and of course a deep dive on your technology and your go-to-market strategies. Just a super valuable investment of your time.
Yeah, thanks, Richard and Tom. But my favorite part of what we heard was what I would consider the science fiction part of analyst relations, the new technology, the new services that we're seeing emerging in the market that are available to help companies and analyst relations pros improve the value that they deliver, to be able to better track what the analysts are doing online. And as you pointed out, Tom, tracking who's influencing whom. I think it's kind of a misunderstanding that analysts work in isolation in their little cubby holes at home, sipping their lattes, when in fact they connect with other analysts in other firms on an ongoing basis. There's a whole vast network out there that can be tracked and managed and understood with some of the new AR tech that exists, and even determining the influence of certain analysts on key deals. The future of industry advisory, that's another part of the sci-fi aspect, looking into the future. Are crowd platforms going to continue to have more influence? Will they improve? Will they continue to be just heavily influenced by the reference clients that vendors send to them? We're seeing barriers to that emerging already as the cloud platforms try to improve the quality of the crowd advice that's being provided. There's new specialist firms. Quite often, PR firms will provide AR services, but they're new specialist firms that focused on analyst relations. And then there's independent analysts, journalists, people who have tremendous influence, sort of journalists / analysts. Substack is giving these people more and more power, and they are becoming social media influencers that actually influence the crowd, which influences the analyst within the large analyst firms. Tracking all of this with feedback loop within the feedback loop is going to require new services, and the emerging technology will help.
Thanks, French and Tom, for going through those priorities for what we need in the AR Masterclass. So what are our next steps? So our goal is to serve a community-driven forum of AR professionals and include others, product managers, product marketing professionals, anyone engaged in influencing the influencers. And to start, we're designing a masterclass that focuses on the challenges and priorities of AR professionals. So we've broken the concept of a masterclass into 3 levels of detail. First, an intro webinar, which is what you're watching right now, and then a more detailed AR Pro virtual half-day event, including presentations, panel sessions, and a workshop. And that should happen first half of the first quarter of 2022. And then finally, an in-person masterclass for AR pros, travel restrictions allowing, sometime in the first half of 2022. We're looking forward to that, and we're in the process of looking at wonderful locations in the Bay Area, Austin, Texas, Seattle, Boston, Chicago, Washington. Any feedback you have on location, and any feedback you have on the content and the way this is going to be delivered, we deeply appreciate. So please reach out if you've got some ideas for us. And once again, I want to thank Tom Austin, French Caldwell, for joining me in this introductory to a masterclass webinar.